Hey guys, welcome to our weekly news show here on Backstage with Millionaires. I'm Caleb, your host, and it has been an exciting week here in India's startup ecosystem. We saw the aftermath of Nykaa's IPO, Delhivery filed their DRHP, but I wanted to start this episode off by talking about Ola, and specifically their ride-hailing business becoming operationally profitable for the first time in over a decade. So as we all know, the pandemic hit Ola pretty hard, specifically their ride-hailing business, and pretty much anybody in the ride-hailing space suffered because of the pandemic. Many are still suffering. Companies like Uber, companies like Didi Chaojing over in China. But specifically when it comes to Ola, they actually ended up seeing a 95% reduction in their business during the peak of the pandemic. This was extremely painful for the company, and they had to take measures to cut costs. They ended up laying off about 1,400 employees, and they did a couple of other things as well, but they were able to reduce their costs to about 75% of what they had spent in 2020 in 2021. So in 2020, their losses were 2,683 crore rupees, and they were able to bring that number down to 682 crore rupees. That was a massive reduction. And now, because of this reduction, they're actually able to be profitable. And so at first glance, this does seem like a similar situation to what happened over at Zomato, where during the peak of the pandemic, their business was suffering, they were losing money, they weren't able to raise funds from investors because nobody was interested in the food tech space at that point. Everybody was worried about this uncertain future created by the pandemic. And so Zomato made the decision that, okay, we're gonna go to the public and we're gonna raise these funds from them instead. And so you could draw comparisons there. You could say this is similar. What's happening at Ola is very similar. But the reality is that Bhavesh Aggarwal actually announced that Ola was gonna be going public in the next 24 months back in March of 2020. And this was before the pandemic really started to become a serious thing. It was at the beginning of March. So at that point, the virus, COVID-19, was sort of localized to China. It had started to spread to some other countries, but it wasn't something that everybody was thinking would impact our lives for the next year, 2 years, possibly 3 years. Nobody saw that this was going to be a serious thing at that stage. And so Ola had made that decision to go public, and it wasn't out of desperation. It wasn't because they couldn't raise funds from investors. It was just something that they felt was a good thing to do. And they'd been talking about it for a while. And so now the end of that 24-month period, March of 2022, is just around the corner. And so it's likely we'll see Ola filing their DRHP at some point in the near future, and then we'll be able to get more insights into what's going on at Ola and what we can expect from this IPO. But for the time being, what we know, and this might change, but they're gonna be raising between $1 and $1.5 billion from this IPO, and they're gonna be doing it in India. And that's great news because before Zomato went public in India, the prevailing mentality amongst startup founders and people in the startup ecosystem was that when you go public, you gotta go public in a country like Singapore, a country like the United States. Don't go public in India. But now it seems like that trend is changing. We're seeing Zomato going public in India. We've seen Nykaa now go public in India. Ola is planning to go public in India. So this is a really great thing, and I hope that this trend continues. All right, next up in the news, let's talk a little bit about omni-channel beauty retailer Nykaa's IPO. This was one of the most successful IPOs in Indian startup history. It was oversubscribed 82 times, which is more than 2x what we saw with Zomato. Their IPO was oversubscribed 38.25 times, and that was a huge success. But now we're seeing a doubling, more than doubling of that success with Nykaa. Now, just breaking things down really quickly, qualified institutional investors made up the most oversubscribed category, followed by HNIs, and then eventually at the bottom, retail investors, people like you and me, oversubscribed 12 times. And in case you're wondering what oversubscription is, if Nykaa is issuing a single share, then there are 82 people in this case that are actually interested in owning that share, interested in buying that share. So only one of those people is going to get the share, but there's 82 of them that are competing with each other to actually buy and own that share in Nykaa, which is great. It means that there's lots of demand. People are really excited. And one of the reasons for that, in this case, Nykaa is actually the first ever profitable Indian startup unicorn to go public. And so I think the public and qualified institutional investors and HNIs who are also part of the public saw this and thought, wow, this is a profitable unicorn. I want to invest. I want to own a piece of this company. It's the first time that it's happening. Who knows if the next time it happens, there will be this much enthusiasm. But in case you were wondering why Nykaa's IPO was so successful, that might be one of the reasons why. All right, next up in the news, logistics unicorn Delhivery is going public. They filed their DRHP. They're going to be raising $1 billion at a $6 billion valuation. And most of this money is going to be going into organic growth, growing their logistics network and also launching new lines of business. But some of these funds will also be allocated to inorganic growth to acquire companies that they're either competing with or companies that have products or services that are actually complementary to what Delhivery is building. Now, I should note here that unlike Nykaa, Delhivery is not a profitable startup. They are a loss-making startup like Zomato. And so just like Zomato, they're only going to be able to allocate 10% of this IPO to retail investors, people like you and me. However, I should also note that Delhivery has been consistently growing their revenues ever since 2011, to the point now where they're actually bigger than Blue Dart. This was a company that was founded in the 1980s, and Delhivery now at this point, even though they were just founded about a decade ago in 2011, they're already bigger than Blue Dart. But how has Delhivery been able to do this? How have they been able to grow their revenues consistently ever since 2011? Well, the biggest reason is internet penetration. People are ordering things online. Even in tier 3 and 4 cities, small towns, small villages, people are getting smartphones. They're getting feature phones. They're able to access e-commerce platforms, and awareness about these platforms is also spreading as VCs put more and more money into this space so that these companies can advertise to these consumers that otherwise wouldn't have found out about these platforms. And of course, the pandemic has accelerated this. All of a sudden, people were at home. They weren't able to go out to the store or to the market to buy things, and so they were ordering things to their homes. And of course, that's where Delhivery makes money, because they're transporting these items from e-commerce warehouses to the end consumer. All right, moving on to some acquisition news now. EdTech unicorn Unacademy has made their 4th acquisition in 2021. Swiflearn, an online live face-to-face coaching platform for students between the grades of 1 and 10. And they're doing this essentially to get into Baiju's territory. There's going to be some butting of heads here because up until this point, Unacademy has mainly been focused on test and exam preparation, while Baiju's has been dominating the coaching space, basically tuition for students between kindergarten and grade 12. But now with this acquisition of Swiflearn, Unacademy is moving into that space, and they're trying to get a piece of that pie. So Swiflearn is offering a personalized home tuition experience to their students. These are students on CBSE and ICSE boards. There's currently 1.2 lakh students using the platform, and they're being taught by 1,500 teachers, which might seem like a small number. Unacademy has 60,000 educators on their platform teaching 60 million students, but that's in the exam and test preparation category, whereas Swiflearn is operating in a completely different space. They're focusing on tuition and tutoring. So this should be a pretty big asset for Unacademy. This is kind of like ammunition basically for them to take on Baiju's. And I look forward to seeing what happens now that these two companies are competing more directly. All right, moving on to some funding news now. Online marketplace for beauty products Purplle has raised $75 million in a funding round led by Kedara Capital at a $630 million valuation, which is a 4x jump from their previous valuation in March of 2021. Now, on this platform, you can buy more than 50,000 beauty and personal care products from more than 1,000 brands, but I think it's worth noting that Purplle actually has a lot of in-house brands as well, and these brands make up more than 1/3 of their business. So they're taking a very similar approach to what Nykaa has done, where they're offering an online marketplace where other companies can sell their products, but then eventually they come in with their own private label brands and they start making a lot of revenue from those products. The startup is growing 80% year on year, and they're selling products worth more than 100 crore rupees, that's GMV, gross merchandise value, every single month. They're going to be using some of these funds for organic growth, launching new brands, new products, and some of them they're going to be using for inorganic growth, basically acquiring other companies in the beauty and personal care space. All right, next up in the funding news, 10-minute grocery delivery startup Zepto has raised $60 million in a funding round led by Gladebrook Capital at a $225 million valuation, which is significant because this startup was founded just 8 months ago by 2 Stanford dropouts who thought that they could do online grocery delivery better than the incumbents, companies like Grocers, Big Basket, Swiggy Instamart, and Dunzo. The startup is currently growing at more than 200% every single month. They've got 40 dark stores. These are stores that you can't visit physically, but you can order from online across cities like Delhi NCR, Mumbai, and Bengaluru. The startup is going to be using these funds to expand into 4 new cities in the next 30 days. These are Hyderabad, Pune, Kolkata, and Chennai. And then by the end of the year, they're planning to have set up 100 dark stores. Now, this startup has definitely generated quite a bit of conversation, quite a bit of debate, partially because the founders are very young and they're dropping out of Stanford, which is not the normal profile that we see with Indian entrepreneurs. That's more common in the United States, where kids going to prestigious schools drop out to become entrepreneurs. But in India, typically, they do finish their studies. They're IITians, they're students that went to BITS Pilani or schools like IIT Bombay. That's a particularly hot place for entrepreneurs to originate. But in this case, they have dropped out of Stanford and they're starting a company that is delivering things very quickly, which is another thing that a lot of people are debating. Is this a good thing for society? Is it going to make us more impatient, more snappy, more upset when things don't go our way, when deliveries don't come within 10 minutes? Are we going to get angry? Are we going to get frustrated? Or is it making society more efficient? Are things moving more quickly and that's going to speed up the pace of life, the speed of progress? And I'd love to get your thoughts on that in a comment down below. Is Zepto making society a better place or not? All right, next up in the funding news, neo-banking startup Fi has raised $50 million in a funding round led by B Capital at a $315 million valuation. Now, Fi, of course, is a neobank. They're not a traditional bank. They're not even really a bank as such. They've partnered with Federal Bank to allow their customers to open accounts through Fi, but they're making banking and finances easier for their users through a smartphone app. You can create a rainy day fund using Fi, you can do easy money transfers using this platform, and you can build better savings habits through the app as well. So Fi is going to be using these fresh funds to build investment products for their customers, for both stock investments and mutual funds. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from it. And if you did, it would mean a lot to us if you could hit the like button, share this video with a friend or two. And also, if you haven't already subscribed, now would be a great time to do so. We post new videos every single week about Indian startups, entrepreneurs, and the latest news. Also, if you've been watching this show for a while, then you probably have noticed that my setup has changed yet again this week, and I'm going through a bit of a life transition. Don't worry, everything is okay on my side, but I just wanted to explain why things look a little bit different, and obviously, things are not ideal when it comes to my setup, so I'm just sort of stacking things up. This is temporary, but I don't have a tripod, I don't have any lights, and that's not normal. Usually I do have those things. I have had those things, I think, since we started this news show. So this is the first time that I'm doing things in a bit more of a DIY, jugaad way. And I appreciate you guys bearing with me here as the quality is a little bit worse than it normally is, but hopefully I can get things improved as soon as possible. I also wanted to say thanks to all of our Backstage with Millionaires members, our unicorns, our decacorns, our hectacorns, the people who financially support us directly with their hard-earned cash. You guys are awesome. And I've been thinking about you all quite a bit as I go through this transition, knowing that there's people out there that are so excited about what we're doing. It really does give me a lot of energy. It gives me a lot of enthusiasm and happiness to know that you guys are loving what we're doing enough to support us. Also, thanks to everybody who's been applauding our videos with super thanks here on YouTube. That also really helps us out. But even if you can't afford to financially support what we do here, just the fact that you've watched this video through to the end is plenty of help. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Backstage with Millionaires, and I will see you in the next one.